Well, hello, Rick Warner. Welcome to the Joe Fosco Show.
Hey Joe, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good, good. Now you're Skyping us from sunny Southern California?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us where? You don't want to put that out there in the public arena.
Well, I'm in Orange County near Huntington Beach.
Nice, nice. Well, for those of you in the audience who do not know who Mr. Warner is, he's been studying organized crime in America for over 30 years, and he's written numerous articles on the subject. Mr. Warner has a column in Informer Journal and is currently working on several projects, including an outfit encyclopedia with Gavin Schmidt, who he has, I think, published some books on the Milwaukee Mafia. Isn't that right, Rick?
Yes,
Good.
yes.
Now, you and I have had some extensive conversations, and we've talked about all sorts of things, and I won't go into details about what you and I have discussed, but we've discussed quite a bit, haven't we?
Yes.
And I have to say that I think you're probably the most informed mafia expert that I've talked to, for being someone who is completely unconnected whatsoever. I mean, you don't even have a great uncle who knew someone that was in the mafia. Isn't that correct?
No, I don't have any relatives that were in the mafia.
Yes, yes. Uh, I know you're big on the Prohibition era gangster lifestyle in Chicago and other parts of the country, but you know I'm fond of Chicago and my endeavors and things like that. So I may keep this focused on Chicago more than some of the other places you're aware of. But why don't you tell us some of the other cities that you're well informed on as far as organized crime besides Chicago?
Southern California, obviously. Um, let's see, New Orleans is an area of interest of mine, and New York, uh, and to a certain extent, Pittsburgh as well. And
Pittsburgh.
there's a lot of previously undiscovered connections. And I've been working with some other people, including people in Italy, and there's a whole undiscovered and unpublished layer that most people don't know about. So, and we'll be getting into that another time. But I've helped contribute in some New York Times bestsellers with research or advice to the authors, and so I know my stuff, and my interest comes about the historical nature of organized crime. I
Yeah.
love history, and I love finding out the truth. And I started out when I was young reading a book called Blood Letters and Bad Men, and that piqued my interest. But there were a lot of mistakes in it, and so it got me to researching, what's the truth. And that's how I continued, and I found all kinds of resources, including people with relatives in organized crime.
Of course. Speaking of finding mistakes, do you feel comfortable sharing your opinion on whether or not acclaimed mafia expert and former FBI agent, the late Bill Romer, had made any mistakes in some of his books?
Well, one of, let's see, I guess what I could point out to a lot of people is there was a book that he wrote called War of the Godfathers,
Sure.
which I guess he wasn't clear to a lot of people that it's a work of fiction. And it talks about the fictional war between the Bonanno crime family of New York and the Chicago outfit. And a lot of authors believe that to be true. But also in his books that are nonfiction, there's times when he didn't have a proper understanding of the nature of the Chicago mob, or he could at other times exaggerate certain details, but then again, we have to consider the context when he's writing, because, the Chicago mob is being kind of mysterious to a lot of people, because, most of the books about it are about Al Capone and not the more recent events until the Family Secrets case. So there's a big gap in our knowledge as far as published books are concerned.
Sure.
And, he had certain contacts, and it's possible that some of them might have been feeding him misinformation.
Well, do you feel comfortable about whether or not I bring up, or I should say, do you feel comfortable if I do bring up the Butch Blasi files that I am aware of that show him as a... why don't I just stop there and just ask if I could finish that? Is that all right if I finish my sentence on Butch Blasi?
Go ahead.
Okay. You know as well as I do that there's a number of FBI files that classify Butch Blasi, who's a Chicago hoodlum under Sam Giancana, or with Sam Giancana, and a number of Sam Mooney Giancana's colleagues, such as Anthony Joe Batters Accardo and Joseph Ayupa. The FBI files show that Butch Blasi was a top-level informant for many years, dating back to the early 1960s. Or was it the middle 1960s?
Probably close to the early, before Sam Giancana went to prison.
Mm-hmm. I reviewed, the file, several hundred pages. A lot of it's redacted. Bill Romer's name is, throughout the entire file. It seems that Bill Romer really believed that Butch Blasi was a true blue federal informant. Would you agree with that that's what Romer believed?
Yeah.
After looking at the file, I believe that he was pulling the wool over Romer's eyes. I saw the information he was giving the FBI, and I can see that it not only did it not create any indictments that we're aware of or put one in prison, it really wasn't anything that was unknown. He kind of verified things that weren't really that important, but yet he did continually meet with agents and continually give them information. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's right.
Now, do you have any knowledge of any other people of his level that were confidential informants for the federal government?
Well, the big name that pops out for that era was Gregory Scarpa of the Colombo crime family in New York.
I see.
Who gave information to agents, and it wasn't necessarily information that led to indictments or prosecutions, because he wasn't going to testify against anybody.
I see.
He was going to give them, information, not enough to put anybody away, but to get the basic structure, kind of explain the names, a little bit of the history. And sometimes he would give out names to benefit himself,
Sure.
Provide information on his enemies.
Right. Now, going back to Chicago, it was you, I believe, that investigated the connection between the Fischetti family and the Capone family. It was very well known in Chicago among certain circles that were closely connected to organized crime that Fischetti and Capone, or the Fischettis and Capones, were cousins. In fact, I know I have personal friends who were very close to both the Capones and the Fischettis who have insisted that that Capone referred to the Fischettis as his cousins and vice versa. But you know a different story, don't you?
Well, the Capones trace back to the city of Angri in the province of Salerno. And the Fischettis, their father was Nicola Fischetti. And so he came from Sant'Angelo dei Lombardi in Avellino in the province of Campania. And, back then, distances meant a lot of things because we're talking about the days of the, where you get around on horse, eventually there'd be trains. People generally didn't have cars back then, and we're talking in the, late to mid 1800s. And, so it was about 67 miles apart, so it's quite a distance back in those days. And, the provinces were, relatively close from our point of view, but maybe not from theirs. And, from what we've been able to find is there's no biological relationship unless it's really a distant one. And I got this confirmed from a living Capone relative. Ralph Capone also testified at the Kefauver hearing, and he denied it there. I mean, we can take his words with a grain of salt, but that would seem like a harmless thing to admit to if it was true. And he said it wasn't. And also the author of a recent book has done a family tree for the Capones, and the Fischettis don't come up in it either. But it turns out that another guy was a relative of the Capones, and he did come from the same city as the Capones.
Who is this?
That's Frank Nito, known as Frank Nitti,
Right.
Frank the Enforcer.
Yes.
He was an actual cousin, and he helped, or his family at least, helped lead the way for the Capones to leave Italy and settle in Brooklyn.
Very interesting. Yeah, I know that you have a great deal of records that you have from the FBI. In addition to your interviews with relatives of gangsters all over America and friends and other associates, you do have a very large collection of FBI records. In fact, I know we're on Skype and sometimes we get some interference. Did I lose you at all? Or are you still with me?
I'm still here.
All right, good. From what I understand, from what I recall, it was you who contacted me at some point a year or two, maybe 3 years ago, and told me you came upon a file that I believe was that pertained to Ross Prio, who was a pretty significant Chicago gangster, and you said, Joe, you've got to see this. Your father is listed in the record as someone who would deal with and meet with him, with Prio at some place in Chicago or a suburb outside of Chicago, etc. I did have the prior knowledge of knowing my father and Ross were very close friends. In fact, I'm very close with sources extremely close to the late Ross Prio and stay in touch with them periodically. What do you know about Ross Prio that some of us maybe are unaware of? Any highlights about who he was or what he was?
Well, basic thing that people would need to know about Ross Prio is that for a long time he was the capo regime, the the boss of the North Side crew, which is dominant over Rush Street in Chicago, but had covered other areas, but mostly around Rush Street. And
Can you, Rick? Can you repeat?
There were a number of names connected to him that were under him. Jimmy Allegretti, the three Doms.
Mm.
Yeah. Did we break up there?
A little bit. Sort of when you were talking about what area Ross Prio was in charge of.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was the capo, the boss of the North Side Street Crew. Okay, or the North Side Crew. Yes. Which covered Rush Street and other areas near it. And his crew included people like Jimmy Allegretti and Cesar DeVarco.
Sure.
The three Doms, Dominic Brancato, DiBella, and the other one whose name has slipped my mind in a second. So, it's not coming to me right now. But there are three guys whose first name was Dominic. They were part of that crew, and they tended to hang around each other.
Yes.
So,
there were
Excuse me?
There were rumors that Ross was very well to do, financially speaking. Right,
and he was known for being heavily invested in a cheese company in there. And that was one of his big legitimate sources of income.
Interesting. Well, going to or arriving to today in the outfit, you think it still exists?
Oh, it definitely still exists. Not as organized as it used to be, and a lot smaller than it used to be.
Sure. Who do you think the boss is today? Do you care to comment?
Well, it's the current speculation is that it's Sally De Laurentiis as the day-to-day operating boss. That's the current theory. From a lot of people.
And as you know, in our previous conversation, or our most recent conversation, I am of the opinion it's possibly organized by a very small, intimate group that we could refer to as a committee that I certainly think De Laurentiis sits on. And I think a lot of these people in Cicero are somewhat involved too, to some extent. Maybe not quite as powerful as some of the elder members, such as Mr. De Laurentiis, but nonetheless, I guess I'd have to agree with you that the outfit is in existence today and much smaller, a lot less powerful, but still an organization I don't think the average person would want any problems with. Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, it's never a good idea to have problems with them.
Right. When are we going to be able to go to the bookstores and get the encyclopedia that you're making with your colleague?
Well, it could be a little while. We're trying to get as many FBI files as possible, and we verify the information in them, go through genealogical types of verification as well, such as draft registration cards, census records, birth and death records, anything else we can find, and if we can find relatives as well. And we talked to a number of them, but there's a few important people that the FBI's kind of lagged on when it comes to getting those files. Some important people that we really feel are important to our collection of entries.
I see. Well, we look forward to this encyclopedia coming out, and I hope that you would come back and join us in the near future so we could cover a little more latitude and see you again soon. I want to thank you very much for coming on the show today, and I wish you a wonderful afternoon or evening, whatever phase of the day you're in California now, Rick.
Well, you too, and it's been a pleasure talking with you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Pleasure's mine.